The pregame show for Marshall is different from many schools. What makes it unique?
Well, we do a fairly long pregame show to start with compared to some schools. Now, some do longer, but we have 2 hours, and of that 2 hours, the first hour is carried by about five stations on our network, and then the other 10, 12 stations only carry the second hour. So we have to think not only about the people who are listening to a 2 hour pregame show, but then also regroup for the people who are coming online only with an hour to go. So it's important to have it well planned out, make sure you don't leave out the important things, and I think that just helps us overall because we script out pretty much everything in that pregame show. And when we expanded to 2 hours a few years ago, it made me change the way I think about a lot of these things. One is that you have your kind of solid standard segments that everybody does, a pregame interview with a coach, you do some scoreboard reports from the studio and that kind of thing. But we had a lot of time to fill, and I thought we could use it maybe a little bit differently with that extra hour. So, number one, I do, like anybody would want to, kind of start off the top by setting your storylines for the day. But then we will kind of move away from not only solid football talk, but even away from sports in general at times. One thing that has worked out really well here for us at Marshall is that we kind of let the university, the president's office, decide who goes into one segment and let us promote something that's going on at the university. So the president himself might come on for a 3-4 minute interview 3 or 4 times a year. But for other games, if something big has happened, if the forensics program has gotten a big grant, or if the international students program has a big international fair coming up downtown the next week they want to promote, we allow that to happen, and it's been great in terms of goodwill with the president's office. He thinks that we in the athletic department are looking out for them, and it's not only about us. And so that's been, I think, an element that we've added that's been helpful, and we've also been able to sell it. Sponsorship has been good on that. The interest has been high. So that's an idea that maybe not everybody has done that they could look at. Another thing is not just football, but for instance, last week, Marshall's golf team won a tournament for the first time in 13 years. So we had the golf coach on for 3 or 4 minutes. So you get those segments and mix them in with the football. And then the other thing that I think we've done successfully, I like it at least, your mileage may vary, is that we try to stay away from, I deplore the talking heads, the chatter going on and on and on. So we do some of that. We have a segment with some interviews, but we try to mix in some highly produced segments, pre-done with music and all that kind of thing. For instance, This Week in Marshall History. We've got a good history and tradition, and just a 3-minute segment where we go back through the years, pre-produced, talk about a game that happened in 1918 where Marshall scored 100 points, and a game that happened in 1948 where a guy ran for 200 yards for the first time in school history. Bring it on up to recent times and mix in a play-by-play highlight. We have a good 25-year archive of our radio broadcast, and so mix those in, pre-produced segments with the music and sound effects and highlights to break up the chit-chat sessions where you just have, the 3 to 4 minutes of two guys talking back and forth. And I think that really spruces things up, spices things up, and keeps things from kind of droning on and on. Then you mix in your football, you mix in your other stuff, and that's where your outline is really important. Make sure you don't stray too far off the path. You get back on, you make sure everybody's on the same page, all the people who were involved in your pregame show, keeps them on task, and you go back once and twice and 3 times again to your main storylines and make sure you hit on them. And again, when you start all over for the second hour, you don't want to be repetitive, but you need to reintroduce those storylines that you're going to be talking about over and over throughout your entire broadcast.
Why did you start doing your pregame show in this fashion?
It happened when we expanded from 1 hour to 2, and we had done the standard interview with a coach, scouting reports with the offensive and defensive coordinator, and we didn't want to just lengthen those kind of things. I thought that got to be kind of dull. So that's when we went to, instead of a 4-minute conversation with the offensive coordinator, we do a pre-produced scouting report with a couple of sound bites from Marshall players talking about an offensive tackle who's talking about the great defensive end he's going to block, or the quarterback talking about how they disguise their blitzes and that kind of thing. And then also a soundbite with the offensive coordinator and maybe a play-by-play highlight from the other team, a big interception they made. So you put that together into a package with music, and it's a lot more interesting than having two people chit-chat for that 4 minutes.